Well, what you can see with the proposal is that they're trying over the next 30 years to give a planning framework which would allow the city to both grow upwards with more apartments and more intensification, and to move out. And that's realistic because we know that Auckland as a city is going to grow. So what's driving house prices largely is the increase in land prices, because land has been choked off. And that was as a result of the previous council's decision to put a sort of set area of Auckland landmass. So the government's really been working on that, and I think you're seeing a lot of houses being built. We've gone from 10 houses a day being built in Auckland to over 40 a day now. And as long as we have enough supply, then I think house prices they'll probably go up, but they'll go up at a much slower rate than they have been. And that's really what the unitary plan is doing. From what we can see, it's got a good pipeline of supply. But now the issue is that the Auckland Council themselves and the councillors have to vote for the plan. I think they can legally adjust the plan, but within very tight boundaries. So they either need to accept it or reject it. Yeah, so I mean, there's no reason why a foreign investor can't get involved in either New Zealand developments of either infrastructure or alternatively actually housing developments themselves. We know that the Chinese have lots of capital, and we know they have lots of capability. So are they going to be in charge of every development? The answer is clearly no, primarily because they won't be interested in doing that. But you are seeing pockets of very significant investments. The very large apartment that's happening here, it's the size of the Sky Tower. That is Chinese investment. You're certainly seeing it in terms of hotels with Fuwa Group looking to do the Park Hyatt. China Construction is interested in potentially doing some quite big infrastructure on a sort of joint public-private basis, and we think that there's real opportunities on that front. The government itself's put an extra $1 billion into a new fund to help the council again develop the infrastructure. So look, there are multiple players here. There are New Zealand investors, there's the council, there's the government, but there are offshore counterparties. Some of them are Australian, some of them are American, but some of them are also Chinese. So I guess the brief summary is, in 2008, an FTA was signed between New Zealand and China, and that was really effectively, I suppose, a way to think about it as mainland China. New Zealand's always had a one China policy, so we recognise all parts of China, and so our government concluded free trade agreements with Beijing's approval, but with Taiwan and Hong Kong. So we're the only country in the world that has a free trade agreement across all parts of one China. When we concluded the initial FTAs, we were pretty ambitious for what could be achieved, but the reality is a lot more has been achieved than they thought. A lot more dairy products are sold, a lot more wine sold, a lot more other products are sold into China, and vice versa. So at the moment, all of those tariffs are eliminated by 2024. What New Zealand's saying is, why don't we have a goal of achieving that a little bit quicker? China also has some interests about how rapidly it can, for instance, increase investment in New Zealand without having the threshold of the Overseas Investment Office reviewing those decisions. Or, for instance, the number of young people that could come here on a working holiday program. So there's benefits on both sides. I think it's probable we will upgrade the FTA. It is taking some time, but the Chinese side know it's important to New Zealand, and realistically what happens at the moment, all Chinese goods coming into New Zealand are tariff-free, but the goods that we send to China are still attracting tariffs for a period of time. So we're hopeful we're going to make progress there. Well, we kicked it off when we were in Beijing in, I think, April. Our trade negotiators and trade ministers are talking about it at the moment. They met most recently in Laos. So I think by the end of the year we should be making progress on that front. Broadly, yes, but we obviously have to build more capacity and more infrastructure to support that. So the simple numbers at the moment are about 400,000 Chinese come to New Zealand each year. We think that number's on its way to 1 million Chinese tourists within probably the next 5 years or so. What's changing dramatically is the value of those tourists and the length of time they're staying. So the reason that's changing is the Chinese government really tried to stamp out these cheap and cheerful Chinese shopping trips. So people used to come for 3 days, really not get a very good experience, in some instances actually were ripped off, got bad value for money, and so they left a bad impression, and we didn't like it, and actually the Chinese side certainly didn't like it. So what's now happening is a lot more of what we would say is free independent travellers are coming. They're typically staying for about 8 days. Next year we think about 500,000 Chinese visitors will come, and they'll spend more than the 1.5 million Australians that come, because they stay for longer and they spend more. I think the challenge for us is making sure we can meet both their accommodation needs. Some of them are very wealthy, so they want to stay in 5-star hotels, so the sort of Park Hyatt fits within what they want. They certainly want to do a range of activities in New Zealand. We're seeing them broadening out and going to different places. I think we've got to be better at providing Chinese language skills once you move outside of places like Auckland. And this is not new news to us. We did this in the 1970s when Japan was a big market for us and the Japanese travellers came. And you can't expect a person that largely doesn't have a lot of English but has a lot of Chinese to be able to navigate their way around New Zealand easily if there is no language capability. Now, obviously, the mobile phone apps and things that they can use assist them a great deal, but I do think we have to present a slightly more welcoming face to our Chinese travellers. They're very important from New Zealand's point of view. We make money out of it. They employ a lot of people, and they're great ambassadors for New Zealand when they go home to China. Yeah, so okay, what happens there is the first major change that's happened is we've providing online visa capability, and that's really speeded up the process. So when I go to China and meet my counterparts over there, they're now much more comfortable with what's happening, and you're seeing that with the airlines, all of them from China Southern to Air New Zealand, saying that it's a lot easier process now. We do look at other countries and benchmark ourselves against them to make sure we're at sort of world's best practice. Interesting enough, actually, for all of the rhetoric between the United States and China, the United States actually, funnily enough, had the longest multi-entry business visa. So I always sort of laugh a little bit when they go on about China, but then on the other hand have the most welcoming terms. We are always looking to see whether we need to extend our visa terms. I mean, eventually I think we will get to the point where they're longer. There is multi-entry visa already for business people. So again, we always look at what I suppose our competitor countries are doing. I think every country's terms are a little bit different, but New Zealand's are very competitive. It's one of the reasons why we have a lot of Chinese students in New Zealand. So if the terms were so much better in Australia, you'd see a disparity between the two. And the reality is that a lot of Chinese students are choosing to come to New Zealand over Australia. Partly A, because they can work for 20 hours a week, and that helps subsidise their tuition fees. Secondly, because I think they genuinely feel safer in New Zealand and more welcomed in New Zealand. So I don't think it's just solely a matter of how long they can work afterwards. I think ultimately it's what sort of experience do they have. Because there's a mixture of views. Some want to go back to China and some potentially want to stay. Thirdly, we are converting people's qualifications into residency and ultimately citizenship for the very reasons you pointed out, that if somebody comes to New Zealand and does an engineering degree, and by the end of that process, they've been through Auckland Engineering School, by then their English language will be very strong because the courses are held in English. They'll culturally understand New Zealand and they have a New Zealand qualification. We need engineers in New Zealand. Why wouldn't we take that young person that might be 23 years of age and then make the rest of their life in New Zealand and productive in the New Zealand economy? So it's one of the reasons why when people talk about the skilled category and start saying, gosh, there's a lot of people coming in under the skilled category, they don't actually understand what's happening. Those people aren't actually coming in. They're already in New Zealand. And for the most part, they came in under a student visa. They got a job when they were in New Zealand because the New Zealand company wanted to hire them, and all we're doing is rolling that over. So it's quite different from saying they're flooding into New Zealand. They're already here, and they've probably been here for quite a long period of time. And actually, I think it makes a lot more sense to say to a young person that's been in New Zealand, yep, we want to accept you as a New Zealand resident, ultimately a New Zealand citizen, than taking the risk on someone who doesn't know New Zealand at all. We don't know them. We don't know whether they're culturally going to fit in or not. Whereas the people that we convert over, we know that they do. And that's definitely happening. That's why there's 250,000 Chinese New Zealanders now, because you've had quite large numbers coming in through the education system and staying. Yeah, so in broad terms, I'm very pro-migration, and the National Party's been very pro-migration. The reason's been that firstly, we didn't have positive migration, our population would fall, because by definition New Zealanders also choose to go and live in other countries from China to the United Kingdom. So the first thing is you don't want population decline. The second thing is that I always think, people should be welcome to the country if they bring skills, if they bring capital, or they bring the right work ethic. There's plenty of people that come to New Zealand with no money, and actually in some cases not necessarily a lot of skills, but they turn into very successful New Zealanders because they work hard. And one thing we know about the Chinese community is that their work ethic is one that they do work very hard. So I think, like anything, migration's it's always a hot topic. You're always going to have the Winston Peters and increasingly actually the Labour Party, jumping up and down and being anti-migrants, which is a bit sad for the Labour Party because their history actually was being more welcoming of migrants. It seems from us now that it's only National really having such a strong view of migration, maybe the ACT Party as well. But the basic point here is that you should always be able to control what's happening in your country. You should always be bringing in people that can add value in skills or whatever it might be. But equally, we shouldn't be frightened of migration. It makes New Zealand a lot more interesting and actually wealthier and globally connected country. So if you think about things like the Lantern Festival, huge numbers of people go to those festivals. My son goes to that festival and he doesn't go to very many other things that the Auckland Council organises. You just go, and why does he go? Because it's a fun night. He likes the food, he wanders around, it's safe, it's interesting, he goes and does it. And with the simple question you have to ask yourself, is Auckland better off for the Lantern Festival or worse off? The answer, of course, is much better off. Well, to all of the viewers of Sky Kiwi who look at the website, get their information and exchange ideas, congratulations for being part of that new modern social media that is in every part of our life. I think New Zealand's a country of small businesses. That's the way that a lot of people have an opportunity to create wealth and create employment for themselves, their family and their friends. There's no question that the internet is of huge advantage to New Zealand because typically as a small country at the bottom of the world, it's been hard to connect with the rest of the world. But the internet, of course, removes all of that tyranny of distance and of that real challenge that we have. So it allows you to produce a product in New Zealand or a service and sell it to a worldwide audience, via social media, via the internet, via platforms like Alibaba. So congratulations for being part of the modern New Zealand. Good luck with all the things you do. National Party is very supportive of Chinese New Zealanders. We want to see them succeed and prosper and do well, and we hope that when you get an opportunity, you'll support us in upcoming elections.